What's quack-a-lackin', everybody? We have a special one on deck this week. I am at the Pipestone National Monument just outside the town of Pipestone, Minnesota. This is no ordinary national monument. This place has a history going back more than 3,000 years, and it's actually one of the most sacred sites in the history of the entire North American continent. But it's a stunningly beautiful place. There's nice tall grass prairie lands. There's a waterfall to look at and some historic quarries. But this is a very place that's very rich in both history and spiritual connection. So I want to show you around, talk a little bit about this monument, and tell you what makes the Pipestone National Monument so special. Let's go. So the Pipestone National Monument is a roughly 300-acre area. There's a couple of different trails you can take. There is this trail that leads to the South Quarry. That's about a half a mile out and back again. And then there is a 3/4 mile loop that goes around the whole area. So I'm going to take a walk down both trails today. This one goes down to the South Quarry. And while I'm out and about, I'm going to show you how stunningly beautiful this place is and talk a lot about what makes this one of the most sacred sites in the history of North America. Now, these stones behind me are not just random piles of stones. These are the tailings from people who have quarried stone in this area for more than 3,000 years. And we'll get to that in just a little bit. But first, we have to talk about what first popularized this area in Western culture, in our modern Western society. And what really put this place on the map was a poem by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. In 1855, he wrote an epic called the Song of Hiawatha. And the epic is essentially that there is an Ojibwe warrior named Hiawatha who falls in love with a Dakota girl named Minnehaha. But at the very beginning of that epic, he talks about this place. He tells the story of how the Great Spirit, distressed by seeing all of the tribes always warring with each other, brought all of the tribes to this very spot in Pipestone National Monument. He brought the tribes here and he fashioned the very first sacred pipe out of the stone in this area. And the very first peace pipe ceremony took place here, after which the tribes were at peace and had a period of prosperity and abundance. So that's the story as told by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in 1855. And it's really the Song of Hiawatha that made him a literary figure. Before that poem, no one had ever even heard of him, didn't know who he was, but he went on to enjoy great fame because of his mention of this place. But on top of that, he sparked an immense curiosity across the nation about this spot that caused a lot of people to travel here to see it, to see this sacred site that had been documented in this epic poem. And it really is a beautiful epic. If you've never read the Song of Hiawatha, I highly encourage you, take a little bit of time out and read it. It's a literary classic. It's a beautiful, beautiful story, and it is directly connected to this place today. Was Longfellow correct in the things that he said in the Song of Hiawatha? Well, the truth is that Longfellow never made it any farther than the Great Lakes area. So the things that he learned about the Plains Indians are things that he learned through second and third and even fourth-hand accounts from other travelers. And as you know, when a story passes from person to person to person, context sometimes changes, meanings sometimes change. And that was certainly the case with the Song of Hiawatha. For one thing, Hiawatha was not an Ojibwe warrior. I believe he was Iroquois. If I'm wrong about that, someone please correct me, but he definitely was not Ojibwe. He also got Minnehaha wrong. He translated in the epic, he translated Minnehaha to mean laughing water, which sounds kind of funny because of the ha-ha part, I suppose, but being as someone who lives in Minnehaha County, I can assure you for 100% certain that that's not the translation. In the Dakota language, Minnehaha just literally translates to mean waterfall. It can also mean rapid water, like fast-moving currents, but just in general, the literal translation is waterfall. But what about the last part? What about the Great Spirit bringing all the tribes from North America to this spot for the very first peace pipe ceremony? The sun is shielded by the clouds, so I can switch back to my regular spectacles and you can see my eyes. So as for the part about the Great Spirit and the first peace pipe ceremony, it largely depends on who you ask, because every tribe has its own account about this area and what makes this area so special and how they came to know about it. But they all have some similarities. They all generally involve the people going through a time of great hardship, and they involve the Great Spirit appearing and giving them the sacred pipe made of red stone and telling them about this area. Telling them that the stone from this area flows with the life force of the ancestors, and that its purpose is to be your communication mechanism to deliver your prayers to the Great Spirit. And so it largely depends on who you ask as far as the specifics, but a couple of facts remain. One is that at some point, roughly 3,000 years ago, something did happen that caused tribes from all across the North American continent to come to this spot to get the same stone for the same purpose. We can only guess as to what it was or how they even knew that this place existed. The nearby town of Pipestone, Minnesota was not even thought about 3,000 years ago, and even today it's a town of 4,000 people. So this would not have been a spot that was known across the entire North American continent without something spreading the word about it. And the other thing to keep in mind is that pipestone can be found all around the world in various forms. But the pipestone that is here at the Pipestone National Monument is a very special, unique form of pipestone. It is a form known as red catlinite. And this red catlinite is very rare. In fact, in the entire world, across the entire surface of the whole planet Earth, this pipestone is only found in one spot. Right here at the Pipestone National Monument in this quarry. It's the only place it's found. So whether you believe about the Great Spirit bringing the tribes here or not, you have to admit that there's something to be said that for 3,000 years, people from across North America have come to this same spot for the same reason, with similarities in their accounts. And to further compound that, this is a stone that in the entire world is only found right here. And I think there's something incredible about that. If you come to the Pipestone National Monument, you will notice in many places along the trails, people have left bundles as a sacred offering to the Great Spirit. That's a tradition that has gone on in this area for centuries, and it's amazing to see that it still continues today. So, as I said, every tribe has its own story connected with this place. The one that I am most familiar with is the story of the Lakota. And I think this is a story that most all of you have heard at least some portion of before. So there will be some familiarity, if I can say it, some familiarity with this story. But I will do my best to just relay the story to you the way it was relayed to me. And as I said, most of these stories start with a period of extreme hardship. And that was certainly the case with the Lakota. In their story in specific, the bison had just disappeared. The bison were instrumental to their way of life. It was a source of food. It was a material to make blankets. And it was an essential component to life in those days. But just one day the bison were gone and there was no clue as to where they went or even what direction they were traveling. So They needed to find the bison because there was no food to forage. People were hungry, and so the chief sent out 2 scouts. He sent 2 scouts, please go out and find the bison, or at least give us some indication of which direction they went so that we can follow, because if we can just find the bison, life will be good again. The 2 scouts set out to fulfill this mission, to find the bison. They wanted to be the ones to save the tribe, right? To bring food home and to know where the food source was at and which direction it was heading. So they went out on this mission to locate the bison, but they found something else instead. As they were traveling and looking for signs of the bison, what they encountered was an incredibly beautiful woman appeared before them. A stunningly beautiful woman, and she was wearing a white buckskin dress. No one has white buckskin, but she was wearing a dress of white buckskin that was so vibrantly white it almost appeared to be glowing. And it must have been stunning and incredible to come across this woman out in the wilderness. But the 2 scouts, they had 2 very different reactions to this woman. The first scout approached her with impure thoughts, and he didn't get very far with that before he just fell to the ground in a pile of bones. And there is a symbolism here, and that symbolism is that it can be dangerous to approach the sacred without purity of heart. And that's important because we are in a sacred site today, so we need to keep our hearts pure. The second scout, having already been awestruck by the appearance of this woman, and then I'm sure further struck by seeing his friend fall into a pile of bones on the ground, he took a very different course of action, and he kneeled before this woman and bowed his head in reverence to her. And he awaited his fate to see what was going to happen. And what happened was that she told him to rise and return home and tell your people to prepare for my arrival. So that's what he did. He went home as fast as he could, told the chief all about what had happened, and they did exactly that. They prepared for her arrival. Okay, so I have gone down the South Canyon Trail and back. We're going to take the loop trail now, which will take us to the sacred Winnewissa Falls, and we will also get a look at the Oracle while we're out here. I can't wait to show you both of these places. But until then, let's just continue with the story. So the tribe prepared for this lady's arrival, and when she came, she presented them with 2 gifts. The first gift was the 7 Sacred Rites, and these rites, they were sort of the blueprint for Lakota society. It provided them with a system of prayer, a sense of community, and essentially that gift was that she brought them the gift of civilization. And these rites are still what keeps the Lakota community alive and well today. In addition to the 7 Sacred Rites, she also brought them the sacred pipe, fashioned of the red stone, and she explained that this pipe is the bridge between humanity and the Great Spirit, that the purpose of this pipe is to deliver prayers to the Great Spirit, and that the pipe is not just an inanimate tool, it is alive and is an active participant in the prayers. And so she explained to them where to obtain the stone, how to make the pipe. And that is where the pipe ceremony comes into it for the Lakota people. After delivering the gifts of the sacred pipe and the 7 sacred rites, she disappeared. As she disappeared, she sort of rolled, and with each roll, she changed colors, red, black, yellow, and white. And as she rolled into the white, she transformed into a white buffalo calf and walked away. And as she disappeared over the horizon, she made a promise to return during a future time of hardship. And that's why it's always such a big deal whenever a white buffalo calf is born, because they want to know if it is this lady returning to save the day. And it's a beautiful story. Again, it's sort of a myth. You have no way of knowing what layers of truth and what layers have changed over the generations. But it's a beautiful story, and it ties directly back into this place. And it just also ties into the importance that the particular stone found in this specific spot of North America has always been regarded as spiritually sacred. So just a word about the sacred pipe, because in our Western world, we think about this as just simply being a peace pipe. And while it sort of is a peace pipe, it's almost a disservice to think of it in that way, because this isn't just a peace pipe. This is a sacred tool. It's a sacred medium that is intended for connecting the human world with the spiritual realm. And we tend to think of these guys sitting around smoking this pipe. And in fact, the use of the sacred pipe is not even intended to be as an intoxicant. Much like former President Clinton, when they smoke the sacred pipe, they do not inhale. It's simply puffed and the smoke allowed to drift so that these thicker clouds of smoke can more strongly carry your prayers to the Great Spirit. This pipe is considered so sacred that there are rules and protocols associated with its use. For example, the pipe should never touch the ground. Any of you in America could probably identify with this, because in our culture, we do not allow the flag to touch the ground. If the flag touches the ground, it's considered to be soiled, and there are processes for retiring it. And this is sort of the same thing. The pipe should not be allowed to touch the ground. You can spread a blanket and put the pipe on the blanket or something else. But if you do this, you should never step over the pipe, because that would be an act of disrespect. And being that this is a medium, a bridge between you and the Great Spirit, it's something that should always be treated and approached with both purity of heart and absolute respect. The portions of the pipe, the stem and the bowl, they have their own spiritual attributes. The stone bowl of the pipe is considered connected to divine feminine energy, the Mother Earth. And the stem of the pipe is considered the more masculine element and is supposed to represent the heavens above. And there are typically feathers or other adornments that would represent the flight of the prayers to the Great Spirit. So if you do ever get a sacred pipe, please keep the pieces separated, because when they are combined, as I said, this pipe is thought to be a living entity and an active participant in the prayer. And when the pieces are joined, the pipe is considered to be in active mode. It is awaiting a prayer to deliver. And so if you get one of these things and you attach the pieces and put it on your shelf as a nice decoration, it's going to look absolutely beautiful. But you're going to leave this thing in a state where it's just perpetually waiting for an opportunity to fulfill its purpose and never being given a chance to do so. So if you do have one, treat it with proper cultural respect. Wrap it in a bundle to keep it safe. Keep the pieces separated unless you are using them for prayer. And just keep cultural respect in mind, because these aren't decorations for your home. These are sacred items. I just wanted to give you a quick shot of these cliffs and bluffs as we make our way more into a main quarrying area. As I mentioned, people have come here for more than 3,000 years to quarry this stone from this spot. And that is a tradition that still continues to this day. In fact, there are 23 different tribes in North America that still have representatives that come here to Pipestone to this very day to quarry this stone using hand tools and traditional techniques. And that stone is handed off then to artists who, again, use hand tools and traditional techniques to craft these stone into sacred pipes. So the artisan continuity of all of this is absolutely amazing, because these are traditions that have been handed down from person to person over the centuries. Even though this area was connected to traditions and cultures involving spiritually significant acts that spanned thousands of years and orally passed down traditions, the area suffered with the arrival of the settlers. Right off the bat in the 1850s, when Longfellow popularized the interest in this area, people began to arrive because they wanted to see it. And some of those people stayed because the area is beautiful and they wanted to be near it. But unfortunately, those people did not have an understanding or a respect of the indigenous cultures, and I don't think they realized just how special and sacred this place was to these people. So they wreaked havoc. The U.S. government at that time was already looking forward to the settlement of this area, and the last thing they wanted was problems with indigenous people related to their spiritual beliefs. So they tried to appease the situation by designating this area as an official reservation placed under the control of the Yankton Sioux, who then shared this area with all of the other tribes, because you have to consider that for thousands of years, this area was considered neutral ground. As I said, tribes from all across North America came here to this spot to get this stone, and it was considered to be a gift from the Great Spirit. And so this was neutral ground. Even if you had enemies back home, you could come here and quarry and craft this stone together in peace. And in fact, in many circumstances, that neutrality extended beyond this site itself, and also included travel to and from this site. So you could literally transit through hostile territory, and as long as they knew that you were coming to this location or returning home from this location, you would not only be guaranteed safe passage, but in some instances you may even receive an escort to make sure that you safely return home with the stone. Just to give you a quick example here, the cliffs are predominantly a very large layer of the pink Sioux quartzite. And then at the very bottom, you have this very thin layer of red catlinite pipestone. So to get to this, they have to use hand tools and chisel away all of this. All of this from the top has to come down so that they can get to this and get it out of the ground to make the sacred pipe. Now, that would have probably been good enough had the settlers just respected the boundaries of the reservation, but of course they didn't. And a series of encroachments took place. One of the most notable ones was that the mayor of the town of Pipestone, just 2 miles away from this monument, the mayor built his home right inside this quarry, not only on the reservation, but inside the quarry that these people had been using for thousands of years. He just decided that this is mine now. I'm going to build my house here. And this set off an uproar, as you can imagine, not just with the local indigenous people, but as I said, people had come here from all across North America for thousands of years. Even today, as I said, 23 different tribes still come here from across North America today. So this was not just a local problem. This was a problem that spanned the whole continent. People were upset, and the government needed to do something to squash this. So what they chose to do was to send in the army. They did, but not against the indigenous people. They sent in the United States cavalry to evict the mayor of Pipestone out of that house and to destroy the house because they said you have no business being on this reservation. And it would have been great if they just left it at that, but I guess once they were there, the government decided, you know, this is kind of a cool spot to build something, so let's build something here ourselves. Check it out. We found the oracle. I'm going to divert from the story for just a moment so that we can check this out. What the oracle is a outcropping of rock that, when viewed from the correct angle, resembles the shape of a human head or a human face. And the oracle is said to be the guardian of this quarry. So if we can get up these giant steps. Let's take a look. Let's see if we can find the oracle. So I'm not 100% sure I got the angle directly on, but this outcropping directly in the center frame is supposed to be the oracle. And from this vantage point, you can kind of see like the nose and a little bit of the eye. At one time, there was a sign here with a peephole that had everything lined up perfectly so that you got the best view of the oracle. But that sign is no longer here today, so we're just having to do it freehand. But yeah, I believe this is the oracle, the guardian of the quarries at Pipestone National Monument. The view from atop this cliff is beautiful. I mean, it's not the grandest view I've seen in my life, but I have to admit, this is pretty nice. Minnesota is a beautiful state. So anyway, back to the government and their encroachments on this area, because what they decided to do was to build a school on the reservation. And the school was known as the Pipestone Indian Training School, also known as PITS. If you thought your school was the PITS, this one literally was. And what PITS was a place where the government would remove children from indigenous families, and they would put them in this boarding school as a program of assimilation, to wipe away all the old beliefs and to have them believe the same thing as Western civilized society. And that was the goal, and that was a program that didn't just take place in this area. It took place across the country as westward expansion happened, and we began to expand into more traditionally tribal lands. They wanted to assimilate these people into our culture, and that's what PITS was all about. And again, as you can imagine, people were not happy with this. Again, it was across the entire North American continent, even though this particular school was focused on the indigenous community local to this area. They built this school inside these sacred grounds, and that alone didn't make people happy. But then to further complicate that, they were erasing the culture. Assimilating people into new ways of thinking that these people historically did not believe. And so that was an insult and an affront to their community and their heritage. And they were naturally very upset about this, but they tried to take it through the legal means, and they filed a court case that went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. Now, you can still look this court case up today. It is the Yankton tribe of Indian Sioux versus the United States. And they filed this court case sometime around 1889, 1890, somewhere in there. And they fought this case in court for decades. And it went through the lower courts and then the appeals courts. And it went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, who finally heard the case in 1926 and made a ruling. And the ruling was that, yes, we agree with you. Them building on this grounds is 100% violates the treaty that we formed with you in 1858. And it's a cultural affront, and we're very sorry that it happened. But the only way that we can repair this situation, because they said at this point, the school had expanded to more than 60 buildings. And they said at this stage, the school is too deeply entrenched in the local area for us to remove it. So the only thing we can do is pay you for the land and the government take possession of it. So that was the solution for not only that, to build the school here, but then they lose the land, lose the sacred site, and all they're going to get is this money that they don't care anything about. And that's also a joke, because I challenge you to research how much money the tribes got for this land, because the fact is they never received a single payment. The Supreme Court ruling did not impose a monetary value for the government to pay. It just stated that the tribe was owed payment for this land. And upon that ruling, the government initially seized complete ownership of this property, but the actual payment would have had to come through a claims commission. There was a process for this sort of thing, and there is no historical record of the claims commission ever paying the Yankton Sioux or anyone else 1 penny for this property. So again, this was an ongoing issue. No one was happy. No one was happy. And I can hear Winnewissa Falls in the difference. My noise canceling probably isn't picking it up, but I can hear it. I know we're close. So no one was happy with this situation, and the people continued to fight it for another decade. And I have to give credit to the United States government of the early 20th century, because there are so many stories, including in what I just told you, where the United States government just steamrolled over the rights of people who were here long before them. But this is one case of an example where the government actually stood up for the people's rights. What they did was they made this entire area a national monument, which brought with it many federal protections that would prohibit anyone from ever developing this land. But unfortunately, under most circumstances, those same protections would have prevented the indigenous people from coming here to quarry this stone, as they had done for thousands of years. And so what the government did was that they made the tribes the custodians of this national monument and set forth special provisions so that any member of any recognized tribe in North America can get a permit from the federal government to come here and quarry this stone the same way that their ancestors have for 3,000 years. So while this is a national monument that we can all come to see and appreciate as visitors, the fact that it is still an active sacred site and a place for spiritual practices brings in play a number of special rules and provisions. For example, as a visitor, I have to stay on the guided path. I'm not allowed to just wander freely through the monument as you could in other places, because this is sacred ground and there are people still out here today engaged in sacred practices, but more so just to protect the land, because the land itself has been desecrated so many times by the settlers through construction and their own quarrying of the quartzite and the pipestone for building materials. And they just want to protect this land, because you have to consider that this land is not just considered sacred. Everything here is considered to be living. Even the stones are just as alive as the grass and the trees and the birds flying through the air. And so everything here has a purpose and a meaning, and they want to protect it, and I'm glad that they do. I'm glad that we have these tribes as custodians of this property, and I'm thankful that they allow me to still enjoy it myself. So, as you can tell from the sound of the rushing water, to say nothing of the waterfall behind me, we have arrived at Winnewissa Falls, and I can't wait to tell you about these falls, because while to the indigenous people who come to this area find the stone and the quarries to be the most sacred element within the Pipestone National Monument, to me personally, it is these falls, and I can't wait to tell you all about them. So these falls are named Winnewissa Falls, which in the Dakota language translates to mean jealous woman. And because of that, settlers in the early days that were promoting tourism to this area would often have postcards and other promotional items that told this story of the spirit of a jealous woman associated with these falls. But the truth is, that's just something that was made up by the settlers. There is no spirit of a jealous woman here, and there has never been any story or myth related to such a woman. So there never was anything to do with a jealous woman, even though that is the literal translation in the Dakota language. The reason they chose the name Winnewissa is because it was in what you would call a onomatopoeic naming, meaning that to them, it sounded like the falls were saying the name Winnewissa. And so that's why they gave it that name. You just heard the falls. Does it sound like it's saying that to you? Probably not. But the falls were a little bit different in those days because, for one thing, you have to consider that this was a day and time before modern agricultural practices had diverted water supplies for irrigation purposes. And so the falls flowed with a different force and intensity. This path kind of diverts us off of the loop and takes us through a stone staircase that will go towards the top of the falls. And there's something else up here of historical significance unrelated to any of the sacred site stuff. But again, not only did the falls flow with a different intensity in those days, but they were also much taller in those days. At some point in the last few years of the 19th century, or the first few years of the 20th century, I'm not sure the exact year, but at some point the settlers decided that it would be a good idea to use dynamite to remove about 8 feet off of the top of these falls. The idea was that they just wanted the land to be more structured and level so that it would be suitable to agriculture. Again, just another instance of settlers taking this land as their own, as they often did. Now, I told you that Winnewissa Falls, to me personally, is the spiritual heartbeat of this place. It's what I consider to be the most sacred spot. And it's considered sacred to indigenous cultures as well, because as the stories were recounted to me, at the time of that first pipe smoking ceremony, which was followed by a period of peace and abundance and prosperity, at the conclusion of that pipe smoking ceremony, the Great Spirit created Winnewissa Falls as a reminder of the promises that were made that day. And if you think about it, if you are Christian, I think that you could identify with the sentiment of this, because in many forms of Christianity, part of your beliefs and practices would be to take some form of sacrament or communion, which is intended to be a reminder of the covenant that you made with God at the time of your baptism. This is very similar. The falls are intended to be a reminder of the covenant that was made between the people and the Great Spirit at that first ceremony. And that makes Winnewissa Falls incredibly sacred. But it's kind of a sad story, because what my soul cries out for is to just step right over here to the top of the falls and to dip my hand into that water and to drink the sacred waters of Winnewissa Falls. I can't tell you how badly I want to do that, but I can't, because it would probably result in Quackers going to the hospital. The fact is that the water in Pipestone Creek tests with incredibly high levels of nitrates and E. coli and chemical pesticides. And all of this comes from the overuse of fertilizers and pesticides in our modern agricultural practices. And it's literally poisoning the land. And for those reasons, I'm unable to drink the sacred waters of Winnewissa Falls. And I really wish that I could. So I implore you, please buy organically grown food. When you go to the grocery store and you look at the produce section, I want you to keep in mind that all that food has been poisoned. Literally, not just poison sprayed on it that you can wash out, but that stuff gets into the soil and the water table. It's absorbed through root systems, and you're never going to wash off what's inside the plant. So please buy organic. And if you are a farmer, please grow organic. Don't overuse fertilizers and pesticides to the point of poisoning our water supplies, because as you walk through this area, you will see signs along the creek that warn you not to swim or bathe in Pipestone Creek. And the reason is because of the chemicals and the E. coli. And you might laugh at that and say, well, who's going to go bathe in that creek? But the truth is that ritualistic bathing in this creek, particularly before a Sundance is performed, has been a cultural and spiritual ritual for people here for centuries. And they've now been robbed of that right due to our agricultural practices. So while I do sympathize with the plight of the American farmer, I also just ask you to please cut back on the fertilizers and the chemicals. Please, you're poisoning the earth, and you've in fact poisoned the waters of the single most sacred site in all of North America. I just wanted to quickly show you this. If you think back to a couple of weeks ago when we went to Lake Benton, at the beginning of that video, I told you that the area was first scientifically documented by Nicollet and Fremont in 1838. And they came through this area on that same expedition. And everyone in the expedition carved their names into this rock. This is graffiti from 1838 by famous explorers. But at this point, it's become a part of the history of this location. You can maybe, I'm not sure, there's a photo here where maybe you could see the writing a little more clearly. And there is a entry from Nicollet's journal from June 29th, 1838. It says, towards 1:30, we finally arrive in the valley of the famous red stone, which is sought after by all the tribes of the North and Northwest for making pipes. When not prevented by war, they come to this place on a yearly pilgrimage to quarry it. So that was the words of Joseph Nicollet in 1838. Now I let myself get distracted a little bit. Waterfalls will do that, and then graffiti from 1838 will certainly do it. So I need to circle back and get back to what we were talking about with respect to this being established as a national monument. That came into being on August 25th, 1837. President Roosevelt signed that into law, and as I told you, he entrusted the local indigenous people as custodians of this property. And people still to this day come to quarry this stone. They still make the same sacred pipes using traditional methods. And unfortunately, what I'm told is that these traditions are at risk of disappearing because the younger generations just don't take the same interest in learning these things. And these are methods and skills that you're not learning them on YouTube or through a textbook. These are things that you learn through hands-on practices with people who have been doing it themselves for decades. It's taught person to person. And so when the younger generation loses interest in learning these things, they really run the risk of dying out. I was speaking with a lady earlier who is involved with the carving of these stones into pipes. And what she told me was that 20 years ago, her store had crafts that were representative of about 30 different artists. And today she's representing 5. Down from 30 to 5. And so if you take that into account, then probably in the next 10, 15, maybe 20 years, these things run the risk of being lost to time. And that's incredibly sad to me because once they're gone, it's very difficult, virtually impossible to bring them back. So if someone of tribal ancestry should, let me make my way down these stone steps, they're a little steep. If someone of tribal ancestry should ever see this video, I implore you, sit down with your elders. Tell them that you would be interested in playing a role in keeping these traditions alive, because you could be the link in the chain that carries it through and keeps things going. And if you don't take that initiative and do it yourself, then, as I said, it runs the risk of being lost to time. And so much of this culture has already been lost to time. We can't afford to lose anymore. So please, I beg you, sit down with your elders and tell them that you would be interested in just coming here once a year. That's all it takes, just once a year. So please, keep these traditions going. Now, I did almost forget to tell you that what happened to the school, because as I said, it grew to be 60 buildings, right? And there was all this court case. What happened to that school is that it still exists today. Not in the same capacity. It is a different school, but those buildings today are inhabited by the Minnesota West Community and Technical College in Pipestone. So if you go to that school, I hope you enjoy the history of knowing that the buildings you attend class to were once a boarding school for abducted children to pull them away from their traditional culture and to assimilate them into our world. And you're probably also wondering, Quackers, if I come to Pipestone, is it possible to get my very own authentically crafted sacred pipe made from the sacred red stone? And absolutely, yes, you can. You can. There's a couple of places in town. They used to sell them here at the Visitor Center. You can go into the Visitor Center here at the National Monument and watch indigenous artists make these pipes from the stone using hand methods. And you can watch them and talk to them, and they will tell you all about their craft. And in the past, you used to be able to purchase pipes from them, but they stopped that a few years ago because some of the tribes had a little bit of an issue with it. They said that the pipes sold there were not receiving proper respect, that they were being used recreationally and being treated as a novelty, and they just weren't being given the proper sacred respect that they deserved. And that if someone is going to sell them, they should sell them in town rather than here at the monument. So that's the way it is today. There are a couple of places. The one that I know is a store called Prairie Maiden. It's downtown at 102 East Main Street in Pipestone. These are very lovely people. They're the ones that I told you that used to work with about 30 artists 20 years ago, and today they only have 5. But you can go there and you can get a handcrafted sacred pipe, and they will provide you with all kinds of information about the artist that made it, what tribe they are with, and their particular beliefs related to the pipe. So you can still get those today, and I highly encourage you to. The price points vary depending on the size, how decorative the pipe is, and of course which specific artist that it comes from. But you can get these pipes ranging anywhere from $50 to $500 and up. But definitely support your local business. Stop in, get one, but only use it for prayer. Don't use it recreationally, and don't put it up for display. Get it for the proper purpose, or don't get one at all. These little miniature trees you see, I've never seen so many of them in one spot, but this is sumac. And later on, towards the end of the fall, all of these leaves will be really bright red. I've never seen so much of it in one location before. This is incredible. I definitely want to come back in the fall and see what it looks like when it's red. Check this out. This is wild strawberries. Look how many there are. If you like to eat strawberries, they're just right here. They haven't grown yet. But later on, there'll be strawberries right here just waiting to be eaten. No wonder there's so many deer. So I guess that about wraps it up for today. I hope the video came out okay. I felt like I was trying to connect dots that history doesn't want me to connect. And because of that, I felt like it was a little bit difficult to come up with a flow for the story of this place, but I did the best that I could. If you enjoyed the video, enjoyed the scenery, or learned anything today, please do me a huge favor. Take a moment to tap the subscribe button down below. It doesn't cost you a dime, and it helps me out tremendously. As for next week, I have a crazy schedule at work this week. I have a lot of extra hours thrown on me, so I need to keep it close to home. But next week, I plan to go to the town of Brandon, South Dakota. I don't want to tell you what we're doing, but it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're going to plant the seeds of our own legend next week in Brandon, South Dakota. It's something I've been thinking about doing since last year, and I'm going to have a lot of fun doing it, and I'm going to bring you along for the ride with me. So come back next Wednesday at 1 to check that out. But until then, being in this place, I just feel really inspired to share a personal story. I do. So I'm going to film an extra video. I will try to get it edited in time to have it as a bonus video for Saturday. And I'm going to tell you a story about the time that the Great Spirit worked through me to deliver a blessing to someone And in return, I got a blessing of my own back. It's an incredible story, and I love it, especially because it involves my dad. It does. So I'm going to have that video up for you hopefully Saturday at 1, but definitely Wednesday at 1, come back. We're going to go to Brandon, South Dakota for a secret mission. You already know too much, so let's just leave it at that. Until then, thank you for watching. I love you guys. Quackers out.